Zeph, you're on mute.
Oh, shoot. Thank you. Can you all hear me now? Perfect. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Wanting to ask you all if you could drop your name, pronouns, and organization in the chat. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Hinukaki Mahiremba. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight to reflect on the 2023 legislative session and discuss the next steps for environmental and climate justice policy initiatives in our state. My name is Zephyr Jaramillo. I use they, them pronouns, and I come from the pueblos of Isleta and San Felipe. And I also serve as a campaign organizer for Youth United for Climate Crisis Action. And I'll be one of the hosts for tonight's event. And I can go ahead and pass it to you, Johnny.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zephyr. And thanks again for everyone for making the time for joining us this evening. Gwatsi Hopa, Wahaname Huaka, Quake Shashka Hanusta. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jonathan Juarez Alonso. I'm 20 years old and I'm from the pueblos of Laguna and Isleta. And I have the honor of serving our community through my role as policy lead of Yucca, which is Youth United for Climate Crisis Action. So before we go any further, we want to ground ourselves in place and in gratitude. As we do with all of our gatherings, we want to start in gratitude and respect by honoring the indigenous earth, water, and life protectors whose land whose land and shoulders we are standing on today. We know and we all recognize that our work for climate justice is a continuation of the long-standing traditions and a long lineage of resistance against colonization and extraction that the indigenous peoples of this place and all over the world have been leading since settlers arrived. So with this, we must recognize that our work for economic, social, and environmental justice must be rooted in that understanding so that we're grounded and shared and in a shared commitment to ending the violence and healing, justice, and respect for all the land and all her people.
So as hosts, we're calling in from Tewa and Tiwa land. We know that folks are zooming in from all over the state, so we ask that you please take a moment to acknowledge that you are on unceded and occupied Indigenous land. Please take a moment to consider how you can include in your work for climate justice a commitment to the rematriation and restoration of this beautiful place that we call home back to the hands of its original caregivers, so that we can all live here in right relation and in honor of this beautiful place. We extend our gratitude and solidarity to our Tewa and Tiwa relatives and hosts, and we also thank you for starting in respect and in gratitude. So before we jump right into tonight's panel, we want to remind everyone of Yucca's goals heading into the 2023 legislative session. So as you all know, our climate emergency campaign launched in 2019 with the global climate strike, and we've been working since then to advance policies that transition us away from fossil fuels, that protect our environment and public health, and also facilitate investment in the green economy. So going into the 2023 legislative session, we had really high hopes. And so as we all know, climate change took a huge toll on New Mexico last year. We experienced the horror and loss of the state's largest wildfire, as well as dozens of other fires across the state. The losses suffered by our communities, by our forests, by our watersheds were unimaginable and unquantifiable. People's homelands, people's lives, and also people's livelihoods are forever changed, and the impacts will be generational. Then we had the IPCC issue a dire warning right near the start of our legislative session, saying that we're headed down a path to overshoot the 1.5 degree threshold momentarily unless we throw on the brakes immediately and reverse course. This was the context as we headed into the 2023 legislative session. We thought for sure that our elected leaders felt the devastation that we felt. We thought for sure that our governor and leadership felt the fear that we felt. And we thought for sure that even the people working for industry would realize that after watching things hit rock bottom, that something has to be done. So we're excited to be advocating for some concrete proposals we thought might finally have a chance. So in this past session, we supported Just Transition Fund and planning legislation, which is one of our original demands from 2019. We also supported community cleanup and restoration legislation, as well as policies that promoted the development and implementation of renewable energy. Also a climate emissions reduction bill, which we'd been giving feedback on and convening cross-organizational conversations about, as well as local choice energy, the New Mexico Green Amendment, and the New Mexico 16 vote initiative. We also really supported important water rights bills brought by the Seiki Association, as well as immigrant rights legislation brought by our friends at the Dreamers in Action.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zeph, for taking a moment to really lay out our priorities in 2023. As you shared, we thought that 2023 was finally going to be our chance to get started on the long overdue planning and energy transition work that we so desperately need. But when we reflect on this session, it becomes clear that elected officials on both sides of the aisle are captive to industry. And we don't have the vision or the political will to lead the transition that we need to. 2023 was not only the game-changing year for climate policy as we had hoped, it revealed to us that we have an incredible amount of work to do to shift power in this state. While we have had a couple of very important pieces of legislation passed that are important steps in reducing harm from the current system and reducing pollution, almost every single bill that sought to put limits on polluting industry or protections in place for the environment or for human health did not succeed. And I'm sure if many of you were paying attention, you know that many were even tabled in their first committee. So now folks often ask us, as we're going through session and we're talking about these pieces of legislation, how do we as Yucca analyze climate policy and determine whether or not we support, oppose, or remain neutral on a bill? And we actually have a really useful tool that we created specifically for New Mexico climate policy. It's our energy justice scorecard. And this is something that we first introduced to our community back in 2021. And since then, we've been doing everything we can to implement it into our internal policy conversations. And we're strongly encouraging like-minded organizations and individuals to do the same.
Yeah, so that scorecard has been a super helpful tool as we navigate these complex policy conversations and also these spaces. So now we're going to transition into the reason that everyone has tuned in tonight, our post-legislative session panel discussion. So I'm going to start off by inviting each panelist to give a brief 30 to 60 second introduction of themselves, starting with the badass matriarch from the Navajo Nation, Leona Morgan. Leona, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Wow, thank you. My name is Leona Morgan, and I've been working on uranium and nuclear issues for a long time. And this session, we had a huge victory. So I'll be happy to talk about Senate Bill 53. And what that deals with is a threat of a new nuclear waste dump just next to WIP. WIP is a weapons waste dump, and this would be a waste dump for nuclear energy waste. And then there's a lot of uranium mining stuff happening at Grand Canyon and Church Rock and things like that. I'll be happy to give updates if anyone has questions, but I know the focus is on the ledge. Thanks.
Thank you, Leona. Alejandra?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Alejandria Lyons. I use she, her, ella pronouns, and I'm the coalition coordinator with New Mexico No False Solutions. Our coalition came together in the legislative session of 2022, coming together against hydrogen. So that was one of our big things this last year, but super happy to be here by way of Yucca. Some of our other coalition partners include Pueblo Action Alliance and Los Jardines Institute, all grassroots frontline groups. And I myself am reporting to y'all from Southern Tiwa territory.
Thank you, Ale. Paula?
Good evening, everybody. Paula Garcia. Buenas tardes. I'm coming to you from Jicarilla territory in the Mora land grant. And it's good to be here. I'm with the New Mexico Azteca Association. I use the pronouns she, her. And thank you very much for the invitation. I've been with the New Mexico Azteca Association for over 25 years, and we do advocacy around water rights, protecting water, for our communities as a community resource against commodification and contamination. And I'll talk about one of our major bills this year about protecting water from commodification, which was House Bill 121, due process and water leasing, that I'll get to this evening. But glad to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Paula. Michael?
Thank you, Zephyr, and thank you very much to Yucca for the invitation. My name is Michael Leon Guerrero. I'm the Sustainable Economy Policy Advisor for the Center for Civic Policy. I work with two coalitions through that, the Prospero Nuevo Mexico Coalition and Power for New Mexico. I have, roughly 3 decades of working in doing community organizing around environmental justice issues, but also national network building with groups like the Climate Justice Alliance, the Labor Networks for Sustainability, and the Grassroots Global Justice Alliance. So, and I'll be talking primarily about House Bill 188, which was the Economic Transition Act. I'll pass it on. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Chile? Oh, Chile, you're muted.
Yat el khasin lo shike she ya shinshla do to heglini da shja ki ani da she khatshi ni da shnala do shalchne e ka pahadanla ikha kwa tkhain hilkonshlo. My name is Chile Algi. I'm from Shiprock. Principally, I work with a farmers collective, and it was helpful in getting HB 142 approved this legislative season. So glad to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chile. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. So our panel is going to consist of 5 questions and we'll alternate order so that way everyone gets an opportunity to answer first. It might sound a little confusing, but don't worry, Johnny and I will be here to keep us on track. So my first question tonight is going to go to Leona first, followed by Alejandria, Paula, Michael, and then Chile. So Leona, what climate and environmental justice proposals were you working to advance this session and why?
Well, specifically, we were fighting a nuclear waste dump. So it was good that we were actually working on a yes fight. Usually we're saying no to something. So this session, Senator Steinborn introduced a bill. This was the 3rd time to work on it. And essentially the bill, it prohibits a nuclear waste dump at the state level, but this is a federal project. So it's Holtec International that plans to bring all the waste from all the nuclear power plants in the country here to New Mexico, just temporarily until they have a permanent place to put it. So this bill, it stops the state from issuing state permits on this proposal. And the way it's related to climate is right now, there is no place to put the waste from nuclear power plants. And there's a big push for new nuclear as a false solution. And you cannot have nuclear without fossil fuels. And so in New Mexico, we have a lot of dependence on federal nuclear projects like Los Alamos National Labs and Sandia National Labs, which are weapons complexes. But right now, so there's an argument about, and we don't have to go into details about this, but nationally, all of the like anti-nuclear organizations working in Congress and all over the country. I used to work with them very closely. Right now, I'm trying to shift focus to be more local. Anyways, there's kind of a debate. If there is a dump that is established, we do need a place to put the waste. But if there is a place to put it, it kind of gives an argument that, oh, we can make more waste now that we have a dump. We can make unlimited waste almost. And the discussion really should be including reprocessing. So they think they can bring all this waste here and then reprocess it to make more fuel, but that just makes more waste. So these are false solutions, and it's good that the bill passed, but there was a lot of education that's still needed. For example, I don't know, are we naming names? One of the legislators was saying, can I be pro-nuclear and still vote for this bill? So the answer was yes. So there was a lot of debate about still being pro-nuclear energy or pro-nuclear weapons, but being against the dump, because essentially we don't want a temporary dump that might become a de facto permanent dump. So I'll stop there. And I think some of the messaging might have been lost, but just to wrap up, I think a lot of you know this already, but we don't want the nuclear waste dump because it uses a lot of fossil fuels and there's a lot of waste created. So nuclear is not a solution to climate change because it needs fossil fuels, and then the waste at the end will be radioactive for a long time, which also requires fossil fuels to isolate from the environment and from the human populations. So yeah, there's a lot more to it. Thanks.
Of course, thank you so much, Leona, for joining us. It's always awesome to share space with you. Next, I'm going to queue up Alejandria. And so for, same question to you, Ali. What climate and environmental justice proposals were you working on to advance this session, and why?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, Zeph, for facilitating. Yeah, I think that as the New Mexico No False Solutions Coalition, we were all working on quite a bit, right? So we wanted to uplift what we saw were real solutions. So one, cleanup. I think the bill that Chile and New Energy Economy to get San Juan cleanup was really important, because as we talk about ways to have just transition, we have to talk about cleanup. And I think that, that was one of our big yeses that we were supporting. The bill that Leona mentioned as well, SB 53, because we see nuclear as a false solution. And we also were in support of local choice energy by way of the public power group, New Mexico No False Solutions. We have to have a clean economy, right? But we were very careful to continue our embedding our principles in a lot of the bills that we oppose. So again, for folks who may not be familiar with false solutions, these are inevitably ways in which the fossil fuel industry, or even backed sometimes by federal dollars, are continuing extractive colonialism in our state, because we know that New Mexico is the host state that we ship out a lot of energy for the West. And that's why we've been paying attention not only at the state level, but now at the federal level with some of the federal hydrogen hubs, because for too long, New Mexico has been shipping energy to the rest of the world. And we have to, be home to all these horrible coal fired plants, as well as in the past nuclear, and we want none of that, because what we are seeing as these false solutions, ways of which they're labeling things as net zero or zero carbon, and really what it is it's a greenwashed trick. So one of the bills that we came out pretty strongly against was HB 12, specifically for the pieces that mentioned hydrogen, that mentioned nuclear, as well as carbon offsetting, because we know that much of these carbon pipelines will be going through Navajo Nation. And if we really want justice for New Mexico, we have to stand in solidarity with all nations. So I think that was one of the biggest bills that we fought. But I will say early on, we also voiced support for disaster relief, because as some of the work that I know Paula Garcia has been doing is, we have to do something about the fires. I mean, we have on one hand, we have to make sure that harmful industry is not coming into New Mexico, but we also have to support initiatives that are going to help us put tools on the ground as we figure out how to get out of this climate crisis and uplift grassroots frontline solutions.
Thank you, Ale. Same question to Paula. What climate and environmental justice proposals were you working to advance this session, and why?
Thanks. Thanks, everyone. First, I just want to thank Yucca for all the amazing work that you do, and all the panelists here are doing amazing work. We were doing a couple of things in the legislative session. Like Alejandria said, we did have some legislation that dealt with disaster recovery for Acequia specifically, and that was not a slam dunk as like you'd think, because we had the worst disaster in history. I live here in Mora, where this is the epicenter of that mega fire, and it's driven by climate change. We've been dealing with mega droughts for the last 30 years, and this is the culmination of that many years of lack of rain and lack of snowpack. So this is just a crisis that's of our own making. But disaster recovery, nothing really meaningful or transformational happened with regard to disaster recovery in the legislative session. I think those of us working on it didn't have time to put forward really bold proposals because we were still in crisis mode. But we did get one bill passed that got disaster recovery added to an existing fund, but the funding was stripped out. I know we got some one-time funding, but it's hard to get across to legislators that disasters are going to be a recurring thing, more frequent and more intense, and communities, frontline communities are going to suffer. So I'm going to move on from that one. That was Senate Bill 176, which did pass. Another bill that took a lot of our time was House Bill 121. And I want to thank everyone here who supported us with that legislation. I see many of our allies, and I want to express my gratitude to you. That bill is addressing a major problem with how the state engineer is dealing with water leases in New Mexico. Water transfers and water leases are something that we're probably all familiar with. It's the way that water rights are moved from one place to another, but they're tightly regulated. They have to go to state engineer, and they have to be published, opportunity for protest, and there has to be a mandatory public hearing on protested applications. That is because water policy is social policy. Anytime you move a water right, it's having ripple effects on the ecology, hydrology, and the social well-being of those communities. So water transfers, they're important, and that's why they're so regulated. So there's a major move by industry to deregulate how water transfers are done. We've been able to hold the line in the legislative arena for the last 20 some years, but there's always little shortcuts that industry finds, and they find allies in the administration and in the state engineer's office. So state engineer's office for recent years has been approving leases without going through those mandatory due process steps, calling it preliminary approval, skipping the right to protest and get a public hearing on a protested application, which is a major violation of due process. While our legislation would have made it extra clear in the law, we already think what they're doing is unlawful, but we were adding additional language to make it crystal clear that they had to stop doing that. We got a vast opposition from industry, fossil fuel, renewable industry, chambers of commerce, big ag. And the allies that supported it were Acequia's environmental justice, indigenous-led groups, some conservation groups. So it really tells you a lot. Sustainable ag groups, so it tells you a lot about it. The bill did not pass. There was a compromise reached with the state engineer to add an expedited hearing process, which really industry should have liked, but they just did a full court press to kill the bill. So I think we had some really good debates, and I think we surfaced the interests and where people stand on the issue, and we learned a lot. And so thanks for hearing me out, and look forward to hearing from everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula. And now we're going to go ahead and again, same question. And I'm going to ask Michael Guerrero to join me. So again, in case I know we get a little lost in the conversation, but same question to you, Michael. What climate and environmental justice proposals were you working on advancing this session and why?
Sure, thanks, Johnny. So a couple of things I'll mention. One was the New Mexico Prospera Coalition. You talked about the Green Amendment, so we were working on that as well. And that would have been a constitutional amendment that would have guaranteed the right of all New Mexicans to a clean, healthy environment. And the reason why we supported it was, I mean, especially now, you know, as NEPA, for instance, is under attack, we need as many policy and legal tools that we can get to protect communities, particularly frontline communities that are most impacted by pollution. The other one, which I mentioned earlier, was House Bill 188, which would have been the Economic Transition Act. And that would have created a new division within the Economic Development Department that would have supported the just transition of workers and communities dependent on natural resource extraction. If the primary beneficiaries initially would have been the fossil fuel communities and workers in the Permian Basin and the San Juan Basin. And so the reason for that, obviously, is that in order for us to really do a just transition to the clean economy, we have to provide economic opportunities for those communities other than fossil fuels, you know, if we realistically plan to do this transition. The other things that the bill would have done would have been provided support to the Sustainable Economy Advisory Committee and the set force process. So it would have provided staffing for that, and also support for the advisory committee to be able to do its work, because right now folks are basically doing it on a volunteer basis. And it would have also established a fund because, as we talked about, the need for early, deep, and long-term investments in those communities. So, you know, some of the initial investments, for instance, from the ETA in the San Juan Basin, are clearly not enough for the long-term needs of the communities in that region. And so this would have provided some seed funding to get a fund off the ground that would have provided the longer-term investments and the larger investments that we would have needed moving forward. So HB 188 actually was, originally we were talking about this as part of the climate bill negotiations. We ran it on a separate track as particularly as the negotiations around that stalled with the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. And then ultimately, as we know, the climate bill died. So HB 188 went on a separate track, which got complicated. And I'll just tease it up there for the next question, and I'll explain what happened to it at that point. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Michael, for sharing with us. And lastly, we're going to go to Chile with the same question. What climate and environmental justice proposals were you working to advance this session, and why?
Okay, thanks, Zeph. The credentials that I introduce myself with these days is that I am a grandpa, I am a farmer, and an earth defender. And those three causes in my personal life are the reasons why I do the work I do. And that gave me the impetus to help my representative Anthony Allison in presenting the proposed legislation in HB 142 with sponsorship also by my Senator Shannon Pinto. And what the legislation called for was to assess the waste that was left by the companies in closing down the San Juan generating station here This abandoned plant is like 17 miles upriver from where we're at, where my farm is and where my grandkids are. And they left 59 million tons of coal ash. And also they left large ponds of contaminated wastewater, waters that have been channeled through the plants over time. And some of these ponds are unlined. And of course, the um, the probability of the chemicals filtrating into the watershed and eventually out to the San Juan River is a very high probability. So the companies that walked away from the plant and they did retirement in place, that they'll walk away and leave everything as is, and then come back and visit like 25 years down the road to see what the conditions are at that time. So that's the environmental concern that HB 142 addressed. And we were successful in getting that through the legislature with the funding of 135 $1,350,000 to the two departments in state government to begin assessment of these waste that's been left behind, and then to begin the development of strategies on how to do the cleanup. So, you know, because the potential of this waste going into the river certainly would have impacted the health of my grandkids into the future. It certainly had a high potential to contaminate the farmlands that we have, the crops that we grow, and it also would continue to contribute to the damage, the destruction that is being done to our Earth Mother. So I was proud to help in this with this bill, along with Marielle from New Energy Economy. So that's the one legislation that I was helpful on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chile. That was definitely an extremely important piece of legislation that we fortunately did see pass this past session. So our next question is going to go to Alejandria first, followed by Paula, then Michael, then Chile, and then we'll go back to Leona. So this next question, can you please share your analysis? Were the proposals you worked on successful? What would you say were the concrete steps forward that you were able to accomplish this session?
Yeah, I'll take a stab. I mean, it's hard because I feel like we're fighting so many bills, but I'm really happy to see the ones that were supported, that went through, specifically SB 53. Just super huge props to folks like Leona that have just been working on this for a long time, because I mean, that's what happens with many of these bills, as well as San Juan cleanup. I think one of the biggest wins of No False Solutions is collectively with our environmental justice community coming together to take out offsets from, I believe, SB 520. I think through the cross-organizational meetings that were convened by our coalition as well as Yucca were really helpful in the way that we were able to get offsets taken out of that final climate bill. Now that bill was tabled, and ourselves as our coalition still had, some amendments we would have given, but, I think looking to the future, as we think about maybe even crafting our own climate leadership policy, what that would look like, I think this has really propelled us into a good way of building those relationships. And so, I just want to thank folks like Power 4 and who have been doing a lot of great work. Michael, your communication has been great. And, even folks that we've been working with now post session, folks like Welk. And, I think it's really important in this moment, as we see New Mexico in a moment where we have to decide whether or not we're going to continue to have an extractive economy, for us to share some of these tenets together. Because if we really do want to care for our land, our water, and our culture, ultimately we have to continue to do this. And I think that coalition building is the way we have to go. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes our legislature doesn't listen to individual groups. I think with that bill HB 121 that Paula mentioned, I think us coming together to really talk about what this means for water rights transfers, and us coming together for a coalition to back an effort like that, we need to have these conversations early on and continue coalition building and listen to Indigenous voices, youth voices, and folks who have these issues in their backyard. So that's what I would add.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alejandria. So for this next same question, once again, I'm going to be asking Paula. So again, same question, kind of sharing your analysis. What were the proposals you worked on this session successful? And what would you say were the concrete steps that you were able to accomplish?
Thank you. I want to pick up where Alejandria left off about coalition work, and that it's really important to start earlier. We did have really good support, and I feel it made a big difference in really making the committee hearings a lot more interesting and getting some good votes. The bill, again, what it did is try to put a stop to practice by the state engineer of granting preliminary approval in water leases, which we think is unlawful. District court has ruled it unlawful. There's an AG opinion that says it's unlawful, and the practice has continued despite that. And we wanted a bill that was really strong. And it passed the House Energy Committee, and it passed the House Judiciary Committee. But the Judiciary Committee passed a substitute, which was a compromise with the state engineer that actually tried to find a middle ground to allow an expedited hearing process that still retained the notice and public hearing on a protested application. So the due process was still intact, and that's why we agreed to it. And the industry opposition was massive, as many of you probably encounter with a lot of the climate bills. And I just want to say that I think that the water crisis would be happening even if we weren't dealing with climate change and the climate crisis, because even without the climate crisis, we would be in a water crisis, because we're overpumping our aquifers, and the legal framework now is really allowing this transfer and leasing of paper water in excess of what actual wet water corresponds to that paper water. And there's a lot of things we can get into on the water side. So the debate was very revealing, because you could see that the industry groups were really opposed, and they made it seem like the sky was falling, like they weren't going to be able to get water for their industry. And there was a lot of misinformation that they brought forward. Pattern Energy, which is a renewable energy company, was the main opponent, and that's what made it hard for Democrats to support the bill. And that was what they kept bringing forward. They kept saying, oh, but we're going to hurt renewable energy. Now, oil and gas has always been, the fossil fuel companies are the main opposition, but renewable energy was like the darling, that they had some of the Democrats had a hard time opposing. So that made it really hard, because it was like we were attacking In the words of the speaker, he said, well, we really want Pattern to build this big transmission line. And it's our goal, it's our goal to convert to renewable. So it really put a dent in us. Ultimately, he voted with us, but, a lot of those issues were being brought up. When it got to the House floor, we thought we had the votes. And there were just about, 6 or 7 Democrats that tend to vote with the Republicans on these kind of bills. And we couldn't put it to a vote. It was too close to call. And our sponsor didn't want to, thought, well, it's already unlawful. Maybe we should just, why should we go down on this bill if maybe without the bill, it should maybe go to court instead. So we're kind of, we're going to have to regroup with all the allies and strategize on what the next steps are. But it's very grave, and we're still not sure if the state engineer is going to continue the practice now that the AG opinion has been released. So if anyone wants to learn more and see the AG opinion or the court opinion, court ruling, I'd be happy to share that. And there's the battle's going to go on, and this is going to be happening forever. This is a tough pitched epic thing between the ones that want the water and everyone who's protecting them versus those who are water protectors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula. Next, I'm going to bring up Michael. Again, same question. So, your analysis, what were the proposals you worked on this session successful, and what were the concrete steps that you were able to accomplish?
Okay, thanks, John. I'm gonna say an overall yes on HB 188, and I'm going to explain the complicated journey that gets me to an overall yes. So what happened with HB 188 was literally we had a terrific hearing in its first hearing before the Government and Indian Affairs Committee and Elections Committee, and so it passed that one. Literally that same day, our bill sponsor got called up to the 4th floor and was told that the administration was not going to support the bill moving forward. And this is despite indications that we'd gotten from the New Mexico Economic Development Department that they were supportive, and other agencies were as well. So, so we started looking for other options. Representative Small, the head of the Finance Committee, at some point proposed to us, can we merge some of these proposals, because NMEDD is getting hit with a number of requests for creation of new divisions. And he proposed that we merge our bill with a bill that hadn't been publicized yet by Meredith Dixon for an advanced technology division. And that was the language at that time, was advanced technology. When we saw the final version, it was an Advanced Energy and Economic Transition Act. And as many of you know, that included basically what it would have done is create another division that would have developed a process for public-private partnerships for advanced energy projects in the state, and established a board that would oversee that process, and established a fund for that as well. Unfortunately, the language did include in the definitions of advanced energy carbon capture, nuclear. There was language in there about offsets. There was language in there about repurposing some existing industrial facilities, which was very vague, but which, a number of us were concerned that it was going to be for repurposing like the Escalante plant for hydrogen. And what we were hearing from many of you was that it looked a lot like the hydrogen proposals from the previous year. So, so we went through a lot of rounds. We, if this was going to be our only route, we thought, okay, can we amend this bill? Can we get the language taken out in terms of the definitions for nuclear and CCS and offsets and other things? Can we build in more accountability? So the board that was being proposed, we proposed that there be 5 tribal representatives that sat on that board, and technical and community representatives to be part of that board. So it wasn't just an industry board. At one point, we were told that the Sustainable Economy Advisory Committee would play a vetting role of those projects. And so we also proposed at that point, could we expand the SEEK to have tribes appoint representatives and add an additional representative from disproportionately impacted communities. So in the final version that we saw of that bill, most, if not all of those proposals did not make it in. In the meantime, our groups were doing consultations with our allies, coalitions, and and we were hearing what people were saying in terms of the anxiety that we all felt around it. The last consultation was with the All Pueblo Council of Governments, and in their meeting, they came out opposed to HB 12. At that point, we withdrew our support, and then the bill sponsors took out this 188 section from HB 12, and at that point, it didn't move forward. What was happening on a parallel track, however, was that there was $50 million that was allocated for advanced energy and economic transition in House Bill 2, and that did go through. And due to the work of a number of you and our bill sponsors, because it was also not clear, there were no line items listed for how that 50 million was going to be spent. But due to negotiations, there were 13.25 million that ended up getting carved out for specific things like support for the regulatory agencies, support for DWS, money for HB 142, for the San Juan study. So the remaining 36.75 million is the big question mark. And without HB 12, it's not clear what the decision making is going to be on how that gets spent for advanced energy and economic transition. So that's the work. I mean, there's an opportunity in that to be able for us to be able to push for advanced energy projects that we would like to see in the state, but there's also going to be challenges in terms of what might be proposed with that. And in addition to that, though, I'll just say this real quick in closing, there were also other funds that were allocated. Another 33 million, for instance, that was allocated for this funds that were established by the ETA, 13 million for the LEADA program, and also for the San Juan County's energy transition. So I'd say overall, economic transition got important investments that are pretty significant. But it's going to come down to the work on the implementation and, really working with these agencies and the legislature in the coming year to make sure that they're allocated in the best way. So there's really, when people talked about coalitions, this was really the result of years of collective effort by many of you on this in this meeting. And so thank you for that. And I'll just say a real quick note about the Green Amendment. That got pulled eventually. The coalition of sponsors decided to withdraw it because there's still a lot of groundwork that needs to be done, a lot of questions and opposition that came out. And so we'll be working on doing deeper community consultation and engagement in the next year and give it another shot in 2024. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm now going to bring up Chile. And of course, same question. And if we got lost in the conversation, it's if you could share your analysis with us. Were the proposals you worked on this session successful? And what were the concrete steps forward that you were able to accomplish?
Okay, was passed unanimously. Did provide $1,350,000 to the two departments within the executive branch. And the concrete steps going forward are that the mandate from the legislature is that a complete analysis be done of these holding ponds of holding the wastewater from the plant, and as well as the 59 million tons of coal ash to do of that, and then also to begin developing the mitigation plan and how the reclamation process would happen. So those are tangible steps that have been laid out. Another point that I will mention is that the remediation work that is anticipated will go to displaced miners and plant workers, so that we are able to employ some of our people who were plant workers and miners. And certainly the impact that will be made by this legislation will have long-term beneficial impact on our community, and we're just happy that we were able to get it through. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Chilean. Like you said, those are all extremely important, especially when we talk about a just transition for our workers that are being impacted in that economy that, live off of these jobs. Next, I'm going to bring up Leona. So same question, your analysis. What were the proposals you worked on this session successful, and what were the concrete steps you would say that you were able to accomplish?
Yeah, so I am just speaking as an individual activist. I'm not representing any organization. So I'm gonna kind of give my feedback on what happened. I think it was first with the organizing. It was really good to see a diverse set of folks working on this bill, maybe not all together in one united coalition, but there were several groups working together, and then some folks kind of working on a parallel track. But I would say the success is that there were so many groups, and groups that like you all have been there for the last few years, fighting and working on this issue. But one thing I noticed as the anti-nuclear movement in this country is severely underfunded. A lot of big NGOs, they don't put staff time or resources into fighting nuclear. There are a few national anti-nuclear organizations, but just like grassroots groups, they're underfunded and over capacity. So this year, Sierra Club actually put in a lot of their resources and staff time. So it was the first time I saw them work on this issue through the whole session, not just pick it up, when they're done with other stuff. So that was significant. I don't think that was a success on my part, but I think this is something necessary to fight nuclear, is to get the big greens to work, to actually put money to this, because it's not very well funded internationally. So it's not just a New Mexico thing. This is a national and international issue. The other big success, again, it wasn't, so I'm talking about Senate Bill 53. We have been working in a coalition called the SAFE Alliance. So there's many organizations that have been working over the years on nuclear stuff. And I think we've been trying our best to educate the legislators for years. And I've been going to the legislature. I know a lot of you are older than me and some of you are younger, so I feel like right in the middle. But since 2008, I've been going up to Santa Fe. And again, as an individual this year, I noticed it was the first time I saw some healthy debate from the legislators. I think some of them are kind of getting it with nuclear, because nuclear is so kind of wonky and scientific, kind of like people don't really want to know or talk about it sometimes. I don't know why. Maybe the military connection is too much, but it was good to hear what the education level was of our elected officials. There's a lot of education needed, but I did see, again, since 2008, I saw huge advancements in the understanding of the issue, from uranium mine cleanup the different stages of the nuclear fuel chain, our legislators, I think they're beginning to get it, instead of just signing away, to increase plutonium pits or whatever at Lanel. I think this was the first time I saw the state actually exercise, I don't know if it's sovereignty or what you want to call it, but there's this big debate about our state can't fight the federal government. And like with the indigenous nations, that's all we do. We do that all the time, as we're dealing with colonization. But it was good to hear the state look at this kind of from an EJ lens and really look at the federal government as an entity that we need to stand up to say no. And that to me was a huge success. And we need to build on that and keep putting pressure on the elected officials and keep educating them. So I want to thank the sponsors, and the bill, it was signed into law. I'm going to put a link in the chat, just some background info. It was signed into law the same day it passed the last committee. So that was on March 17th, the last Friday of the session. So that bill, I don't know if it was the first one signed into law, but the governor supported it, and everyone supported it. However, they're still very pro-nuclear when it comes to weapons and other facilities. So I'll stop there, but yeah, huge successes, I think, in some ways, but lots of challenges still to go.
Thank you, Leona, and thank you all once again for sharing your knowledge with us tonight. Our third question is going to go to Paula first, and then followed by Michael, if you're able to stick around for a few minutes. And then I also wanted to let y'all know that we're going to shift our questions just a little bit. So we'll pose the question, and then we'd like to invite all of our panelists to, share their perspective if that's something that they would like to speak to. So our third question is going to be, what is your analysis of the obstacles climate and environmental justice proposals face? And that's going to go to Paula first.
I think the main obstacle is the influence of industry lobbyists and the economic power that they wield. It's astonishing, really. I mean, to watch it year after year after year, as those of us that have been there for a long time. What we saw was with the water leasing bill is that the oil and gas industry continues to wield a lot of influence. The renewable industry was also there opposing this. And, it's what's really striking is that this practice of stripping out due process from the water lease application process is kind of recent. It started maybe 10 to 12 years ago, and it was actually hard to get data, but what we did notice was that it really accelerated during the Susana Martinez administration, and there was a big shakeup during that administration when a very big application was approved to old potash mine called Intrepid, which now there's no more mine. The Intrepid's now just like brokering their old water rights, and they lost some legal cases. But what really strikes you is that that industry really used political pressure to push the state engineer to violate due process rights. And the hard thing is educating the legislators, because the talking points are so persuasive on their side that they're supporting economic growth and acequia, and this is why coalitions are so important, because if it's just the acequia voice, they easily dismiss us. They say, well, acequias are just small farmers, acequias are just sentimental, acequias just like their culture, they're just trying to protect their little water rights. And it's like, no, we care about all the water. We're not just fighting for acequia water rights. This is about the water itself, the water that's all interconnected in the ground, in the rivers, in our aquifers, and that run through everyone's acequias. And it's interesting to me that they're so easily persuaded when all an industry has to come up and say, this is going to hurt jobs, or this is going to hurt economic development projects, and it really shuts down the debate. Like, that's real. The legislators need much sharper tools to push back, and we need better talking points as well. But I just want to come back to how important it was to have partners and coalition members talking to their own areas of the state. Like La Semilla Food Center was able to talk to legislators in a district where there aren't acequias, for example, and Alejandria's group was active, and all of your groups who were active, and Chile came and testified. I mean, it was very beautiful. But the main obstacle was that industry just has it locked down because they have these relationships outside the session where they're lobbying year round, and and they have a one-on-one relationship with a lot of these legislators. I just want to say that too, in the Democratic Party, that there's a large enough group of them that tend to side with Republicans on some of these issues, and we could call them out by name if we have to. And I still have them etched in my memory, which were the problematic Democrats in the House. That when we do a power analysis, that's something we should really look at. And yeah, so I'll stop there. But thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. Really appreciate you sharing your perspective. Michael, would you want to speak on this question next?
Sure. Yeah, what Paula said. I think I think that's definitely clear. I think I and others shared the same optimism going into this legislature, right? I mean, we had a commitment from the governor for a climate bill. There was we've got a very democratic legislature, and and at the federal level, we've seen the IRA pass, as complicated as that is, but there's federal investment available for building a sustainable economy, and yet now, I mean, we've talked about what some of the failures and challenges have been in this legislature. So I think maybe there's a bit of a misread, both in terms of the governor, what her real commitment was to climate action, and her commitment to hydrogen development. I think that's really key. And so I think, like this hydrogen hub proposal is really moving through the DOE, and that's going to make it challenging. And I think there's also a bit of a misread maybe of the legislature, because it was a strong legislature on social issues, right? But that doesn't necessarily, I think we found out, that doesn't necessarily translate to progressive positions on climate or progressive votes on climate, right? And so, yeah, I think that was pretty clear. I mean, we had legislators tell us, hydrogen is already here, right? And we can't stop it, and we need to get used to the fact that it's already a part of the economy of the state. So yeah, I think all of those things really played into it. We didn't start early, actually, because of the election, right? So a lot of groups were really wrapped up in that work, and a lot of the hard work we did around HB 188, for instance, didn't even start until the fall, because we couldn't get the attention of legislators, agency people, and others to get it going. So I think that played into it as well, in terms of like what we were able to do in terms of laying the groundwork for things. But I will say a couple of things that maybe are helpful moving forward to think about is that, one, the focus on workers and communities does resonate with a lot of legislators, so those most impacted. And then also the volatility of the industry was something that we found. So the study, for instance, that says that, fossil fuels economically are going to start to be unfeasible as early as the next 10 years. I think that resonates as well with a number of the political leadership, in that they recognize we do need a transition, whether it's because of climate change or it's because of just the economic reality that we can't be dependent on this industry forever. And economic diversification is another key thing. And so I think the more we can lean into economic development, economic diversification, and the kind of economy we want to build, I think there's a range of allies that we'll find in the legislature on those things. So I'll stop there. And thanks again for inviting me. I'll try to hang out longer, but I have family obligations, but I'll stay on as long as I can.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'd like to invite the rest of our panelists, if they would like to speak to this question. Definitely feel free to come off mute.
Yeah, Zeph, I'm new to the policy development work in New Mexico, but the other main activity that I worked on was the hunger and food initiative. And then also I had some limited participation in the development of the 50-year water bill. And in those circles and in other circles that I've been in, I'll mention that I was a Kellogg Fellow, and even in those supposedly enlightened groups, people that are supposedly objective and sensitive to the sensitivities of indigenous peoples and the earth. You know, I've brought these people from different cultures, different ethnic backgrounds together in a circle. And the point that I would make there is that you know, the mindset of America is that it's been programmed to think that only what is physically visible and felt is all that matters. And what I'm saying there is that as indigenous peoples, we know that that's not all there is to it. That the duality of life, the physical and spiritual, the female, and the male, that those combinations of life is what we see, is what we live as indigenous people. But so-called Americans by nature are programmed to think that, to not think about the spiritual aspect of reality, and that has brought me to conclude that many people that participate in the American economy and American society, American business, American politics, and the worst people that fit this description are the corporate, the energy corporate people, in that I've concluded that many do not have the basis to comprehend what it is that we talk about when we say Earth Mother, and our intrinsic relationship to her, the reciprocity that is necessary to respect and honor her life, and for her to in turn care for us. That dynamic of life is something that is beyond the scope of understanding of most Americans. And to me, that is probably the most egregious example of America, of us wanting to have America understand who we are and what it is that we're talking about. And the policymakers, the politicians and bureaucrats and state government aren't able to conceptualize what it is that we're talking about. And to me, that is the greatest barrier to make any inroads on our terms, on policy and whatever else that we need to to get in place for our people, and our land and our water. So that's my thought on that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chili, for sharing your insight. Curious if our other panelists would like to speak to this question as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in real. Oh, go ahead, Leona. No, you go first.
I was going to say, ask to repeat the question.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So our question is, what is your analysis of the obstacles that climate and environmental justice proposals faced?
I mean, I was just going to mention some of the things that we talked about within No False Solutions. You know, I think that we do live in the belly of the beast, as I hear, you know, a lot of our elders at Los Jardines Institute talk about, right? Because we have to recognize that, like, the fight that we are fighting, the environmental justice community has been fighting for a long time. And our divisions of within our organizations, I think, are one of the biggest issues. There are power dynamics of who is able to access which legislators. And I think that we have to do some digging as a community if we want to build a greater climate justice movement, because our young political officials are getting burnt out, are getting bullied by this administration, as well as even folks like Senator Heinrich. And I don't think that it's correct that, you know, on the ground, we are seeing people have resistance to things like hydrogen, but then behind the backs of the people, you know, our governor is signing off on this. And then, you know, even to some of us who went to Laredo to kind of scope out who was there at the NMOGA reception, you know, our governor said the same thing, that hydrogen is here. And I think that, you know, as a movement, we need to come together to understand what organizations do what well, but also to, you know, think about the power structures that are in our own movement. You know, I think that grassroots groups are constantly fighting to get into many of these policy debates, and they should be the first ones consulted and at the table. And so, you know, I think that that's one of the big things. And what everybody mentioned about education on our legislators, I think that, you know, I heard something really great this week about, you know, especially our legislators that are from our communities, you know, folks like Linda Lopez, folks, you know, there's a lot of great progressives. They don't like to be told what to do, but I think we have to give all of, you know, our political officials, whether at the city level, the county level, or at the state and even national level, what we want to see, and we need to have these conversations early on. So yeah, that's what I want to.
Yeah, thank you, Olive, for sharing. Would you like to jump in, Leona?
Sure. So I'm all over the place here. I think there's a lot of issues and challenges when it comes to access to resources, access to power, time, and who's at the decision-making table. I think as our elder Chili spoke about our challenges as Indigenous peoples, we're given the task of not only fighting these EJ battles, in my case, the nuclear waste dump, you know, San Juan generating station, or hydrogen, all these other fights, they're huge monsters, but we're also still fighting racism, microaggressions from our elected officials, outright ignorance and misogyny, and just all of these things that we still have to deal with as people of color. And so I think it was good this session to see the All Pueblo Council of Governors really step in on the nuclear fight. But I think, yeah, I think we have a lot of work to do because of how much our state is reliant on nuclear weapons dollars. But I do see the education piece is working out. I feel that the years of educating elected officials, I do see it paying off, but it's extremely slow. We had, I think the first big, huge effort to educate the legislators was in 2018. But it was successful because our current state land office, land commissioner, Stephanie Garcia Richard, when she was representing Los Alamos, I'm sorry, the county, and she was representing basically Los Alamos National Labs, she sponsored a memorial that supported Holtec. So SGR asked the legislature to support building this nuclear waste dump in 2016. There's a memorial supporting Holtec, both from the Senate and the House. In 2018, with education, she took the lead in getting a letter signed by many, over 20 representatives opposing Holtec. So that was only 2 years. But from 2018 to now, that's 5 years it took for our bill to pass. Now, we still think the dump is going to get licensed probably by Holtec, they say by the end of May. But the nuclear fight is so long, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to build and work together. I think we saw that very successfully this session. There's other issues I would love to see some of you help and invite you to work on somehow if we can figure it out. For example, in Church Rock, we were fighting a uranium mine. I used to be in the Eastern Navajo Diné against uranium mining, and that mine was licensed in the late 80s. Nothing happened until last November. A company started poking around. We stopped the previous companies, but they change, they buy out other companies, buy other companies, they change names, all of those things happen. So since the late 80s, and they haven't started poking around like really till now. That's good, but we need to still fight them. The same at the Grand Canyon. They were advertising they're going to start mining years ago, but right now, Hall No, we're gearing up to get prepared because we think they could be getting close for real now. So we're just always monitoring, always keeping our eye on everything. And yeah, so the education piece, monitoring, working together, all of that. I look forward to continuing working with all of you. Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leona, and thank you to everyone, to all of our panelists, for sharing all of this information and your insight with us tonight. So this panel has been, such a powerful space with all of your contributions. So our fourth question is, what were some tactics that helped you achieve success? And what strategies do you think we need to employ to build more power and have more success? And I can leave that question open to whoever would like to speak to that first. Thanks so much for being here, Michael. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was nice being on the panel with you.
So again, that fourth question is, what were some tactics that helped you achieve success, and what strategies do you think we need to employ to build more power and to build more success?
I'll jump in here again, since kind of just to continue on the education piece. I think the long-term efforts from grassroots individuals, because like I'm just one person, but there's many, many people that have been working for years. I just want to give acknowledgement to some of our activists who we lost. Like I always want to mention my mentor, Robert Tohe. But then we also have some of our friends down south who have been working for years. And so one of them, his name is Noel, he was an artist, and some of these folks got resolutions passed long ago, before there was even a bill in the session, and people that have done the work who have died of different cancers and things from exposures to different radiation and stuff like that. I just want to acknowledge all of that work, going back to even World War II, fast forward to Yucca, and then all of the things, all of these efforts, we need them. We need to keep working on them and build on them. And I think it is very successful for us to have those old statements from the past. I know Mescalero fought the monitored retrievable storage, which was a previous form of this Holtec dump we're seeing today. And so we do have victories that we need to remember and the work that we've already done. But I just want to say on that note, all of the resolutions that we got passed on Holtec within the last 5 years or so, that was early work done by lots of folks all over the state that I think really deserves some attention, because those really held a lot of weight this session. So if folks are not fighting a big fight or have a big, we're always in crisis mode, but when you don't have anything going on, it's still good to get these resolutions or statements or those things that we need to build our case when it is crisis mode. So like the All Pueblo Council of Governors, they passed that resolution in 2019. And they showed up every committee hearing. So that long-term work, it pays off. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Leona, for speaking on that. Just as a reminder, our question is, what were some tactics that helped you achieve success? And what strategies do you think we need to employ to build more power and have more success?
I'll jump in really quick, Zeph. I mean, I think one of the tactics that our coalition held true to, which really helped as we were kind of shot out just different bills that had false solutions, was staying on principle, was adhering to our points of unity, and one of which is protect the sacred, protect Mother Earth. And, you know, I think taking hard stances and being that coalition to be kind of like the no people, it's very difficult. But I think it's really good because, you know, I think many of us know that we have to have an inside and an outside strategy. That policy is a tool for us to achieve our greater vision, but it's not the only tool that we utilize. And I think that that's really important because, you know, I'm seeing on the Facebook that folks were really talking about, you know, nuclear and the war economy. I mean, we have to have a greater holistic approach. And I feel like I'm very thankful for the folks in our coalition that have continued to hold those principles true, really the beginning principles of environmental justice, of the HEMIS principles, that even started as far back as Las Gorras Negras, right? We have to include militarization. We have to have a greater analysis because we know that many of our politicians, unfortunately, are in the pockets of, you know, folks who want nuclear arms to go to Israel, right? We have to have a very deep analysis on these things because, you know, I think the thing that's also important about No False Solutions is that we are always thinking about our effect on the global South, especially global indigenous cultures. And I think that, you know, sticking to those principles is really important, and calling out extraction and neoliberalism and the things that are these greater systems of oppression, and that we can't just fix it from trying to do policy. We're not going to get anywhere if we just try to work within the system. And that as organizers, as individuals that, you know, have received a lot of this political education, that it's our task to kind of call out our government and call out, you know, those who do have the power and educate them and bring them along with us as well as our community.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Ale. I'm wondering if any of our other panelists would also like to speak to this question. And as a reminder, this question is, what were some tactics that helped you achieve success? And what strategies do you think we need to employ to build more power and have more success?
I was going to say, if we have no more comments on this question, I can go ahead and transition us to our fifth and final question for the evening. Unless I'll give space once again. Any final remarks on that fourth question? All right. Well, our fifth and final question for the evening is going to be, what are you going to be working on now what are you going to be working on between now and the next session? how do we leverage the small successes we did have into much larger successes in the future? And how can folks that are joining us this evening get involved? And again, we'll leave it open. We are hoping for just about everyone to jump in on this one.
One thing that I want to do, that I want us to do, is to begin formulating strategy to introduce legislation that would call for the rights of nature. You know, I have given some thought to implementing some efforts to do just that, to give personage rights to our own San Juan River here. And the considerations that I have to make is whether or not I need to pursue that with our own Navajo Nation government, which I am in a dilemma about in terms of whether I want to accept that colonized government, that imposed government process, and whether or not to give it legitimacy by asking it to legislate and authorize that that personage rights be given to our river. And then I also have that same dilemma with the state government, where the question being, should I need to do that? I mean, we understand the life essence of water, and in our worldview, we know what water represents, and we practice that. We live that that understanding. It's a part of our nature. It's a part of our life. But to dedicate that to writing on a piece of paper and presenting it to a collection of people who, as I stated earlier, may not have the basis to comprehend the essence of what it is that we're talking about. Whether or not I want to do that, and perhaps in some way patronize. I'm not sure if that's the right the giving of rights to the river, legal rights, when I know that my understanding, my comprehension of what that river represents, what water represents in its true sense, in its true essence, whether or not I want to put that on a piece of paper and say, okay, this river now has rights. But I think that we're compelled and basically subjected to participate in these forms of government at the state level and with our own tribal governments. That question of whether we want to, I guess, try to quantify the rights of water in that foreign system. So I I placed that on the table here, perhaps just to have us generate some discussion on it. I'm sure that there are some good thoughts on it, and I want to just put that forward and see where that discussion goes. But this past legislature, I considered even just advancing a memorial that would recognize the rights of nature. But I saw the struggle that the Green Amendment was having, and comprehend the politician and the Democrats. I said I don't know if I should do that. So I basically withdrew that thought and decided that I need to consult with my medicine people, my knowledge holders, to see what might be the proper way to address this. So I just want to mention that at this point as something that that we should consider at least. That's that. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chili. Would anyone else like to jump in on this final question?
Just have a quick response, and I really appreciate Chili's bringing that issue forward. And well, when it comes to the water leasing issue, one of the first things I want to do is have a debrief with all the supporters of the bill to really go through what happened. And it happened so fast, and we haven't been really rigorous about that long-term work and coalition building as we should on the water issues. And so I think I learned a lot, and we learned a lot about the power of coalition building. And I'm taking some inspiration from Leona tonight about those resolutions, just kind of going at a pace and working at it for years when you have the time to talk about it, because when you're talking about it in a crisis situation, it's harder to really dig deep into sometimes complicated concepts. So, definitely feeling a lot of inspiration about that long-term work and about pulling more minds together about strategy and thinking through what next steps are going to be. So I'll make sure that people know when that's happening. And it's been good to be on this call tonight. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I just want to also say thank you to Yucca and to all the organizers and groups, especially all the, because I'm talking about SB 53, especially all the people in the chat, in the participants, all the work that was done on SB 53. It was tremendous. But I just want to say that folks are still watching nuclear stuff at the international level. Julia Bernal with Pueblo Action Alliance. We went to the last COP in Egypt, the United Nations climate meeting. And there's a lot of stuff being planned for renewables, so-called renewables or advanced energies, which includes a lot of more extraction like lithium and other things that we need to be aware of when we're talking about transition. It's not just about changing one extraction to another. We also need to think about reducing and how do we make real change. But I just wanted to leave folks with that there's some of us connected on different levels. So I haven't been home. Chili's talking about a lot of stuff with Navajo Nation. And I was listening to a talk yesterday of James Anaya, the special rapporteur to the UN. And it kind of sounds like all of us are doing work at different levels. And when I asked him questions about how Indigenous people what is the stronger mechanism that we can utilize at the UN that we can really, get free, prior, and informed consent, are these things that are in that United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And I was really disappointed, but maybe also I kind of knew the answer already, is it's not, he said the UN is not like this organization that can, control the other governments, and we really need to be doing the local work. So working at the Navajo Nation, even though it's a colonized structure, I know a lot of people don't vote. I respect that. I have no problem with people that don't want to participate in that colonial structure, but I try to utilize all the tools in my toolbox. So I vote, I go to the Navajo Nation Council when I need to, I go to the state legislature, I work with NGOs and all these different groups. But I think the real thing that I haven't done, that I'm kind of going toward, which I think is our solutions, going toward our solutions as New Mexicans, is really trying to go back to Indigenous knowledge and utilizing those things, because all of the stuff we do out here in the world, there's people at home that are praying for us and taking care of that aspect. That's really important. And we kind of neglect to talk about it, but I just want to let folks know that these things are happening behind the scenes. We have folks taking care of that part too. So we just need to keep on going. That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll jump in briefly too. I put a link in the chat to our website for New Mexico No Fall Solutions for folks to look at our points of unity and, sign on to be part of our listserv. We're still getting things up and running as like a grassroots coalition. But I think that, to expect more from our coalition, to follow Yucca, follow Pueblo Action Alliance, Indigenous Lifeways, Los Jardines Institute, New Energy Economy, Earth Care, and even folks from Center for Biological Diversity. We also, work with several individuals. And I think that, we are here as a resource and want to let everybody know, if you want to learn anything more about fall solutions, I'll put my email in the chat, because we plan to do quite a bit of education leading up to the next session, as well as possibly having conversations with stakeholders about what a climate leadership bill in New Mexico would look like. And so I think that's our hopes for the future as our coalition. But we are here as a resource primarily to serve frontline Indigenous nations, as well as youth and multi-generational movements. We have to educate ourselves on what's coming down the line. As Leona mentioned, we have to look at what's happening at the Conference of Parties level, the federal level. Michael mentioned a lot of those funding revenue sources. That funding is coming into New Mexico, and us as the frontline groups need to be aware of what's going to happen. So yeah, get in touch with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ale, and to all of our panelists for those closing thoughts. We really appreciate you all joining us tonight, and always happy to share space with you all. It's clear that there's a lot more work to be done. So again, really appreciate you all.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us this evening. This is such a rich conversation, and I think if there's anything that became clear tonight, it's that there is still a lot of work to be done in continuing to force climate conversations into the mainstream of our our political climate here in New Mexico. I'm seeing lots of comments in the chat from some of our facilitators, links for all of us to check out. So definitely recommend all of those. And yeah, I think we're gonna, unless there's any other closing thoughts, I think we're gonna basically close out our space. So yeah, Yucca's climate emergency campaign has a policy platform that continues to guide our work. We also want to continue to create spaces where we can share resources and create space for critical movement discourse, and make sure that we're having shared analysis and relationship building. One of those things that we're getting ready to put on once again will be our energy democracy convergence that we'll be inviting you all to once again. And we'll also continue to host these cross-organization conversations so that we continue to build a unified front against extractive industry here in New Mexico.
We also wanted to share with you that we'll be focusing that work on climate legislation, which we're investing in deeply over the next 8 months. So Yucca is throwing our full weight behind building power for and broad engagement around meaningful climate bills introduced next session. And we're hoping to collaborate with as many orgs that will join us from the environmental justice movement, with an emphasis on following the leadership of Indigenous communities on the front lines of extraction. Yucca will continue to convene spaces for groups to share their work and hopefully, to build alignment and power so that a model bill can be introduced. We already have done a lot of work researching other bills and modifying the language of previous proposals, but we also want to make sure that what is introduced is not only in the content of the bill, but in the process of its development. We need to model consultation and, deep community and stakeholder engagement.
Yeah, and just, to make it really clear, Yucca has every intention of throwing our full support behind a climate bill that we plan to introduce next session. And between now and then, we're hoping as many stakeholders and other environmental justice organizations and, even industry partners that are willing to come to the table and have these conversations with us, we will continue to hold these spaces. And as I think everyone knows, fighting false solutions is extremely important to us as Yucca. So we anticipate having to take a stance against hydrogen continuously. We'll continue to create spaces where we can share knowledge with our community about our concerns about hydrogen and other dangerous false solutions, which are being proposed and, are really a lifeline to the fossil fuel industry and, relies both on unproven technologies, but also dirty technologies. As a reminder, at present, 98% of all hydrogen production is made from dirty energy sources. The last 2% are made primarily through green hydrogen, which, as we've covered tonight, uses an excess amount of water, an excess amount that we can't afford in a water scarce state like New Mexico, where we were already experiencing a decades-long mega drought. There is no end in sight. So, our position is that we should be addressing all of the low-hanging fruit that is already proven and available and, vastly underdeveloped here in New Mexico, where we have some of the highest potential, untapped potential for wind and solar resources. So, all of this to say there's going to be a lot of education work that we'll be focusing on with our No False Solutions Coalition and other allies and partners.
So before we end for the night, I'd like to share that we have a call to action that we'd like to invite everyone here to. So on May 11th at 9 a.m., we are asking folks to join us at the Oil Conservation Commission meeting. And we've asked the commission to report back on their failure to enforce regulations that outlaw fracking wastewater spills. So this substance called produced water, it's extremely toxic and it's being spilled and dumped by industry into our land and waterways every day in New Mexico, even though Yucca and others have fought to have it outlawed. So there's still an average of 4 spills per day, and out of thousands of violations, only a couple have, seen any enforcement action by the state. And, we very clearly think that this is unacceptable. So we've asked the OCC to look into this problem, and report back to our communities and the public. So the meeting on May 11th will include a presentation from Oil Conservation Division staff in answer to a series of questions that we submitted to them. So you can join the meeting both in person or virtually. And I believe Johnny just dropped the details for you all in the chat. So we would like you all to please join us. And also lastly, we are currently recruiting for our summer leadership training program. Our El Puente Summer Leadership Academy application is now live. So our summer program is a paid internship opportunity for youth ages 14 to 24. We'll be dropping the link for that application in the chat box. So we ask you to please reach out to youth in your networks and communities and share this with them. Wanted to thank you all again for joining us tonight and hope you all have a good one. Good night, y'all. Thank you.